Cersei Lannister, the only daughter and oldest child of the infamous Tywin Lannister, is one of the most notable and powerful women in A Song of Ice and Fire. She's the daughter of the wealthiest house in the kingdoms, daughter of the man whom many call the most dangerous in the realm, queen of the Seven Kingdoms and mother to monarchs. But despite her position in the world and the power that she holds because of it, a big part of Cersei's character is her hate of her own gender. Cersei laments being born a woman in Westeros. She hates the fact that she can't wear armor or wield swords like men can. She hates that she can't be the heir to Casterly Rock on the account of her gender despite being Tywin's oldest child, having come out moments before her twin brother Jaime. Cersei often feels that in spite of this though, she is her father's true heir, that out of all of his children, she is the most like him. Which really isn't true. Tyrion is, but he's not really counted on the account of his dwarfism by his family. Cersei seems to take herself too seriously, and blames a lot of her problems, especially in the books, on being a woman, and often believes that she should have been born a man instead, that her life would have been much better that way. So it begs the question, what if she was? How could the story change if Cersei Lannister were actually born a boy, and subsequently the heir to Tywin Lannister's legacy? Let's find out. Now, as we get into this what if, I feel that it's important to mention that gender changes are not a small thing when it comes to characters. This isn't as simple as giving Cersei a new body, but keeping her same mentality. The reason for this is that a lot of who Cersei is, a lot of her personality, stems from her gender, or more accurately, how she was raised on account of it, and the situations that she had to navigate through because of it. Situations that will no longer be present with her new gender, which is a very important thing when growing up in the Seven Kingdoms of Westeros. Cersei as a person would change fundamentally because of this change that we see as relatively small. Now, is that to say she's going to be a good person in this timeline? No, not really. But it is similar to a previous video that I did where I explored what would happen if Tyrion Lannister were born tall and without dwarfism. This is a pretty heavy change because a lot of who Tyrion is centers from that dwarfism and how the world treated him because of it. He was molded by those experiences and made decisions for himself based on those. So if you remove that key facet of his character, it's possible that you just end up with someone else entirely. And that could be the case with male Cersei. But moving on. Our story opens on Casterly Rock with Lady Joanna Lannister, wife and cousin of Tywin Lannister, giving birth to identical twin boys. The youngest is named Jaime, but the oldest of the pair is born under the name of Sarion, named after a Lannister king who once ruled Casterly Rock before the time of Aegon's conquest. It shows a great respect for the Lannister histories, of the Lannister family legacy, and the desire for greatness for his oldest son when it comes to Tywin Lannister. It's also a convenient way for me to have a similar sounding name to Cersei, but I digress. With the birth of twin sons, who will later be known as the Twin Lions of House Lannister, I would say that not much changes in the childhood of Sarion and Jaime in comparison to Cersei and Jaime. The brothers grow up close and are nigh inseparable. They eat together, play together, and due to their similar looks, they even cause mischief together, like Cersei and Jaime did when they were kids in canon. They use their similar looks to confuse people and pretend to be each other. There would be a lot of fun in their childhood days. However, a difference from their canon counterparts here is that Sarion and Jaime don't have an incestuous relationship, which is mainly due to Sirion's gender. From what we know about Jaime, he has no interest in men, and while in canon, Cersei has no discriminating taste, having both men and women as lovers in the books, there is no guarantee that Sarion will be of the same mindset. And even if we did apply that to him, Jaime's lack of interest in men kills any foundation there could have been for a relationship like that here. So instead of being lovers, the two of them just have a very deep bond, as deep as it can be for brothers. They often view themselves as halves of a whole, given their similar looks and the fact that they came into the world together, similar to Cersei and Jaime, just without the undertone of incest. Sarion and Jaime also train together a lot, helping each other hone their battle skills. With both being young males and able-bodied youths now, it makes the most sense that each of them will be trained in the art of the sword, instead of just Jaime this time around. However, while they are equal in status on the account of gender, they are not equal in terms of skill. Sarion is decent with a sword, not overwhelmingly good, but not that bad either. He's a passable fighter who can stand his ground, but it becomes very clear early on in their lives that whatever he has, Jaime just has more of. His younger brother has a talent with a sword that cannot be replicated, and while Tyrion can put up a fight against him, their sparring matches often end with Jaime getting the upper hand. It's a sour feeling for Tyrion, but he usually takes it on the chin, though this does breed a bit of a rivalry between the kids, mainly from Tyrion's side of things. As the heir to Tywin Lannister, there's this pressure to be better, and this unbecoming feeling of being outdone by a younger sibling, even if he is only younger by mere moments. So there's a bit of an ego with Tyrion, unlike his brother, that stems from being the heir of Tywin, something that he embraces more than his brother did in the canon timeline. Still, even with that being said, the Lannister family is relatively happy at this point. Until the birth of Tyrion, that is. Like canon, once he is born, Joanna Lannister will die as a result of complications, as she adds a third son to the Lannister family. Like his counterpart Cersei, Tyrion wouldn't be too fond of this new addition to the family. Even with the gender change, I think this is a facet of the character that would remain the same. In fact, I would even argue that the way he treats his brother is worse than canon. Tyrion would see Tyrion as a stain on the family name in comparison to himself and Jaime. From a young age, he would have been taught by Tywin the importance of legacy, of family image, and see Tyrion as ill-suited by comparison. He would pick on Tyrion, and as they got older, I could see Tyrion getting physical with their brother, inviting him to train under the guise of teaching him how to fight, but really it's just an excuse to wail on Tyrion. Jaime would still have a soft spot for his younger brother though, and this would lead to confrontation between the Lion twins as Jaime tries to defend Tyrion. When this stuff happens, Tyrion will really have no choice but to back down when Jaime intervenes. If it's not the verbal de-escalation that his brother offers, it may be the physical kind since Jaime is the better fighter and Tyrion can't keep up. So there's that bit of tension in the Lannister family. Aside from that, there are some other changes to the story on the account of Cersei's new gender. As a male, it's safe to assume that Tyrion will really be in the spotlight of the family as Tywin's heir like Jaime was. He'd likely spend the most time with his father and be sent away for various opportunities and held up for alliances like Jaime was in canon. One that comes to mind is the alliance that never was with the Martells of Dorne. Joanna Lannister was friends with the mother of Elia and Oberyn when she was still alive, and when she died, the Martells actually visited Casterly Rock. Elia and Oberyn were offered up for marriage pacts for either Cersei or Jaime, but with Cersei being replaced with Tyrion, Elia is really the only option for a marriage pact with the Lannisters. This same event would occur here, where Elia is offered up for the son and heir of Tywin Lannister, who will ultimately refuse the match, as he believes that the Dornish aren't good enough for his children. He'll offer up Tyrion to them though, which is as insulting to the Dornish as them making a proposition for marriage to him, so they refuse. When this event originally happened, the main reason that Tywin refused to marry Cersei to Oberyn is because he was planning to marry her to Prince Rhaegar. However, this is a plotline that would not exist with Tyrion. The Mad King at this point in time has no living daughters, only sons, so there's no one in the royal family for Tywin to have his oldest son possibly marry. Though even if there were, King Aerys wouldn't allow it anyway. Being the oldest son of Tywin, we'd see Tyrion's story take on more elements from Jaime's in his youth as he would take on priority as the heir to Casterly Rock. One such thing is him being a squire at Craighall like Jaime was in canon. In fact, I think that they would both be squires together here as they prepare to become knights. They are inseparable after all. An interesting event that I could see happening during this time where they're squiring is the conflict with the Kingswood Brotherhood. This was a band of outlaws operating in the Kingswood and led by the Smiling Knight. This conflict also led to Jaime being knighted in canon. In this timeline, both the Lion twins would be involved in this conflict as the squires of Sumner Craighall, who was helping root out the Brotherhood in the Kingswood. During this confrontation, I actually want to say that Tyrion ends up fighting the Smiling Knight like his brother Jaime did in canon. But as he's not as good as Jaime, he does end up on the back foot, basically losing the fight, and he gets a nice scar on his face from it too. The fight's a little intense, and the Smiling Knight is actually about to kill Tyrion. That is until Jaime steps in to save him, before Arthur Dayne comes along and kills the Smiling Knight, saving them both. I think this is a nice moment for the character for a few reasons. One, it adds a way for the brothers to be differentiated from each other. In canon, they had genders that did it for them automatically, even though they still looked very much alike in canon, but here they look exactly the same to everyone else. No one could tell them apart until now, because Tyrion has a scar. Two, this would also hold a lot of weight for Tyrion as a character. The embarrassment of having to be saved by his younger brother in a fight. Then his scar acts as a reminder of his shortcomings, where he failed and he wasn't good enough, when he couldn't save himself. I think it would add to that little rivalry that he has going on with Jaime, and maybe breed some level of resentment towards him because he had to be saved. It doesn't break their relationship by any means, but it adds to that tension between the two of them. After this event, the Lion Twins would be knighted for their bravery on the field by Sir Arthur Dayne, which is the same thing that happened for Jaime in the canon timeline. I believe that Syrian, while glad to be a knight and recognized for his efforts, would on some level feel like it's undeserved because he had to be bailed out in the end. His younger brother had to save him, and it's not a good feeling as the heir to Tywin Lannister, one of the most feared men in the realm. He feels like he fell short, and he doesn't like that feeling, as if he's in his brother's shadow, and he only got here because of him. So there's that bit of insecurity for the character, but despite his feelings, he does roll with it for the time being. After all, Tywin will be proud regardless. At some point between him being a squire and becoming a knight, Syrian would have also been sent to Riverrun like his brother was in the original timeline. All of this is because Tywin was working on an alliance with the Tullys, and was planning to have his heir marry a young Lysa Tully. This was Jaime before, but that would be Syrian in this timeline. And unlike canon, this is actually something that would go through. The only reason that this marriage didn't happen in canon is because Aerys Targaryen named Jaime to the Kingsguard, who can't have wives or children. Aerys named Jaime to the guard to knock Tywin down a peg, to take his prized heir and leave him with a dwarf to inherit his legacy instead. It was the ultimate insult to Tywin. But in this timeline, with Tywin now having 3 sons, 2 of which are more than exceptional, taking one into the Kingsguard now loses its weight for Aerys. He could take Syrian and he'd still have Jaime, and if he takes Jaime, who is the better swordsman, he'll still have Syrian and nothing will have changed. Unless he decides to take both sons from Tywin, which really isn't possible because at the time he names Jaime, there is only one opening. So Tywin is allowed to keep his heir, and because of this, Tywin would never resign as Aerys' Hand of the King. He quits after Jaime was named to the Kingsguard. This time, however, he'll stay on in King's Landing to sort out all of Aerys' crap, and he'll be able to finalize his marriage agreement with Hoster Tully. And soon enough, Lysa Tully will become Lysa Lannister through her marriage to Syrian. The wedding would take place at Casterly Rock, and it would be a very lavish event. I imagine that Syrian wouldn't be the most interested in young Lysa, pretty as she was back then. Even Jaime wasn't that interested in her in canon. Granted, when he was in Riverrun, he didn't really know that they were being paired together, but the point still stands. And Lysa, while I think that she may be attracted to the eldest Lannister's son, she would also not be as interested because during these years when she was young, she was deeply in love with Peter Baelish. I think the two of them would tolerate each other for the most part, but a part of me believes that at some point, Syrian would cheat on Lysa during their marriage. So while Joffrey, Tommen, and Marcella won't exist in the regular capacity that we know them, it's possible that they could still appear in this timeline in some other form, with another woman, and hopefully with less incest. While on the topic of marriage for the Lannisters, Jaime can't be ignored here, even if he is being demoted to the second son in this timeline. Tywin would definitely prioritize getting Jaime a solid match so he can have children and heirs of his own. This would have been Lysa if he was the eldest son, but with her taken by his brother, there would have to be a new alternative. Jaime could marry a Lannister cousin of his like his father Tywin did, but I actually think that there would be a more interesting option for him. I believe in this timeline that Jaime would end up getting betrothed to and later on marry a young Lynese Hightower. For those who don't know her, Lynese Hightower is, or was, the wife of Jorah Mormont. She's about 5 years younger than Jaime, and she and Jorah fell in love at a tourney after Robert crushed the Greyjoy Rebellion. But their marriage didn't last long because Lynese didn't like her life on Bear Island, where the Mormonts reside. The place was poor in comparison to the thriving city of Old Town, and this is actually the reason why Jorah is in exile in the main series, because he sold people, convicted poachers, as slaves to buy things to make his wife Lynese happy. Then after they got caught, they went into exile, and Lynese left Jorah for someone else. I think that she would be a perfect match for Jaime in this timeline, since the Hightowers are still a respected, wealthy, and influential family in Game of Thrones. They fit perfectly for someone like Tywin when it comes to a Lannister marriage pact. Lysa is also said to be very beautiful in the books. Jorah says she looks like Daenerys, and Jaime is also very handsome as well. So aesthetic-wise, they fit and would probably be attracted to each other. And knowing what we know about her, Lysa would likely be much happier with Jaime, as she'll have to live with him on Casterly Rock, and not have the same culture shock of having to move to Bear Island and having to abruptly give up her lifestyle. She'll be much more at home in the Westerlands with their wealth. It won't be that different from life in Old Town for her. Jaime is also a good guy, and before things went bad with Jorah, Lysa did seem somewhat decent when they were originally getting married, so I think that the match could work for them. Either way, outside of the Lannisters, the Starks also take a bit of a focus in this story. Like the canon timeline, Lyanna will be taken by Rhaegar, and her brother Brandon somehow learns of this and takes his concerns to King's Landing, where he intends to confront the Mad King, but more importantly, his wayward son. Now, a consequence of Cersei being born a boy in this timeline is that Tywin is still the hand of Mad King Aerys, and with them staying around as Hand of the King, I would dare to say that when this event occurs, it's actually the Lord of House Lannister who sits the throne to receive Brandon Stark instead of the Mad King. Maybe he didn't feel like being bothered today with boring councils, petitions, and left Tywin to deal with the grunt work. The reasoning doesn't really matter, it's just that Tywin is here and he receives Brandon Stark. Now, of course, when presented with this information, Tywin would know absolutely nothing about Lyanna's capture, and he would probably tell Brandon that Prince Rhaegar hasn't been in King's Landing in a while, because around this time that he took Lyanna in canon, he did not come back to the Red Keep for a bit. After hearing this, Brandon would demand that he sees King Aerys. A father should know where his son is after all. But whether it's because Tywin knows how volatile Aerys is, and that speaking with him likely won't be a good idea for Brandon, or the fact that he sees a potential conversation like that to be something pointless, he refuses. I believe that Tywin would start picking apart Brandon's story here, asking what evidence he has that Lyanna was really taken by the prince. Who gave him this information, and he would ask if it could even be verified. Brandon can mention the letter that tipped him off, but Tywin can easily disregard this. There is no reason for him to believe that this is nothing more than a childish prank, and even if it was real, he has no reason to look into it and antagonize the Targaryen family for the Starks. So Tywin dismisses Brandon and his party because of lack of evidence, and because who really cares about Lyanna Stark? Especially when the only evidence of foul play you have are just claims and accusations, and information that can't be vetted. Brandon would be furious about this, but ultimately, he would be forced out of King's Landing. This would be pretty big, because with the survival of Brandon, this essentially pushes off the rebellion. Since Brandon wasn't taken hostage by the Mad King, his father Rickard never came to King's Landing to save him. Because this didn't happen, father and son aren't executed by the Mad King. And with Aerys' paranoia less inflamed, he won't order the deaths of Ned Stark and Robert Baratheon, who are under the protection of Jon Arryn. So they don't rise up to defend themselves and overthrow the Mad King. In addition, if Brandon is never taken prisoner by King Aerys, this also means that Jon Arryn's heir, Eobert Arryn, doesn't die in King's Landing, because he went there with Brandon when he tried confronting the king. This means that Jon Arryn will have to get remarried to secure the bloodline later, which would be a whole different task for him now that Lysa has married Syrian. The disappearance of Lyanna would cause some problems, however, as House Stark and House Baratheon would not be happy, as the Starks lose a daughter and sister, while the Baratheons lose out on a marriage pact. Brandon would be persistent in trying to find his sister, and convincing others that Prince Rhaegar had something to do with it. I'm sure that he and Robert want to fight to get her back, but in a timeline like this, that would not be viable. Not only do they not have enough evidence to support that Rhaegar took Lyanna, but starting a war over a single girl does not have the same weight as fighting against the Tyrant King, who unjustly burned 2 of his vassals and tried to order another to kill his wards, who were also the heads of House Stark and Baratheon at the time. Rallying people to find Lyanna or rise up for her would not go well, as most people won't be willing to stick their neck out for a girl that they don't even know, and as far as they're concerned, it's just a dime a dozen in Westeros. However, this issue of Lyanna's disappearance would eventually resolve itself. In canon, it is said that Rhaegar may have been planning to overthrow his mad father, King Aerys, and he even said to Jaime that once the war was over that there would be changes in the Red Keep. I believe in this timeline, after some time has passed, and without an ongoing conflict to delay things, Rhaegar would go through with deposing King Aerys, perhaps with the help of his hand, Tywin Lannister, since their relationship hasn't been the best these days. Rhaegar would take the Iron Throne, and there would be a mix of reactions at this event. People hailing him for removing his mad father from power, and others ridiculing him for usurping him. Even if he was evil and cruel, the story of Jaime shows that no good deed ever goes unpunished. Even if the world was better off without Aerys, he is still looked down on for breaking his oath and killing the king. It will be somewhat similar to Rhaegar, as a son turning on his father would not be viewed that favorably by some people. People would question his intentions as a result. Was he really trying to help the realm heal, or feed his own ambitions for power? Well, either way, while there would be discourse, it wouldn't be the most terrible thing in the world, as Aerys didn't have that many fans that could really make it a real issue. Once Rhaegar takes the throne, I believe that he will reveal the truth about what happened with Lyanna. Going off of the show, since this is the only form of media that actually gives a concrete answer on what happened between the two of them, while the books are still unclear, Rhaegar will tell everyone that they basically ran away together and married in secret, that he annulled his marriage to Elia Martell for Lyanna Stark. This would be pretty bad, as with this one move, Rhaegar would anger a lot of people. The Starks, who didn't consent to this marriage and had their pact with the Baratheons broken involuntarily. The Baratheons, mainly Robert, who was in love with Lyanna and wouldn't be fond of the idea that she was just taken away by the king to have his baby. Then there's the Dornish, who wouldn't like the fact that Elia was set aside like this. Even though the Dornish are more accepting of people taking lovers and the birth of bastards, it would not be the same in this case. Rhaegar didn't just take another lover, and he's not taking a second wife like Aegon the Conqueror or Maegor the Cruel, because Westeros and the Faith would not accept that development. He full-on annulled his marriage to Elia, removing her as queen, so he could marry someone else. And from what we know, it was all without her knowledge. This would make the Martells angry, as he just disrespects their sister, the mother of Rhaegar's heirs, Aegon and Rhaenys, who would still be alive in this timeline since King's Landing was never sacked. So Rhaegar's reign would start off really rocky to say the least, and later on, Lyanna, now queen, would give birth to baby Jon, who would likely have a different name, since he was originally named after Jon Arryn by Ned, and his name was Aegon in the show, but Rhaegar already has a son named Aegon who lived, so it would make no sense for that to be his name here too. I believe Lyanna would still die in childbirth in this timeline as well. Even though she would have access to the best care thanks to the maesters and service to the crown, it's still an unfortunate reality that some women still die regardless of the medical expertise available to them. Her son, at least, will have a better lot in this life, raised as a Targaryen prince among his siblings without a woman like Catelyn breathing down his neck. Speaking of which, with Brandon being alive, the two of them would be getting married as opposed to her and Ned, since that was the original deal. And Ned, if he's lucky, may end up marrying Ashara Dane depending on how things go. He did have a bit of a crush on her in the books. But all in all, if Cersei had been born Syrian, then the entire story of Thrones ends up changing. And while Syrian and Cersei are somewhat similar characters, they are in a position to wreak havoc across Westeros like in canon. But that's where I'm going to end the video for today. I hope you all enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, tell me your thoughts down below and what changes you might have made to the story, and I will see you all next time.